and she said they have a terrible time with LCSO getting a follow-up on anything.
All right, we're all set? Let's call the meeting to order at 9:01. Stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance. All right, is Heidi on the phone, Randy?
She is.
All right, Heidi has asked for permission to call in today. Is there any objection? All right, then Heidi is present. Roll call. Every member is here, so all present. Approval of the minutes from the August meeting.
Move to approve.
Second. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
All right. Anybody from the sheriff or the fire here? Tom, is there anything from MPO? Anything going on
No.
there? All right, public safety survey updates. So we, I want to say the beginning of it, the first meeting in August, went to the council and went through the public survey. And when we mentioned the homeless, Vice Mayor asked us to attend a meeting of the beach ministerial group. And so I did. And the concern was that she was worried we were stepping on their toes. We may somehow give the impression we're not happy with what they've been doing. So I went, and I think there was about a half a dozen different representatives there, explained what we had talked about of getting all the community partners together, an open dialogue for transparency, talk about what they can and cannot do. I was there for about an hour and a half, and the reception was great. This is exactly what we need on the island. So in the next meeting, we'll talk about going forward with that and setting up that meeting with the sheriff and the county, et cetera, et cetera. A couple of things came up out of that. Sean, the pastor from Beach Baptist, said the number is the lowest it's been in a while on the island for homeless, based on the numbers that they're seeing at the churches and what they're giving out as assistance. He also said, and this was pretty telling because it goes to a conversation later on, next one with community policing. He said the numbers being low, the county really were not a priority in how they go about coming out here and the resources. They'll make them available, but because the number's so low in comparison to the rest of the county, that it's hard for them to get competition for the resources, which I guess kind of makes sense. If we have a small number, they got big issues somewhere else, they're going to focus somewhere else. And so that will be coming up as part of their discussion. I asked him to make sure he raised that. And so the next meeting, when we start, because I put in front of you a list of topics, but the next meeting, when we start to prioritize, we should start giving some thought about how we want to put that meeting together. The one thing they did ask that it be a special meeting, not a regular monthly meeting, so that it can be focused solely on that topic. Think about who we might want to invite and who we might want to, how we want to facilitate that. Community policing, for those that haven't heard, that was voted down 3-2 by the council. There wasn't a great debate about, well, I guess there was, so there's some debate about whether community policing was needed here or not. But the bigger issue seemed to be, with a couple of them, prioritization of the funding and who is going to pay for this. It was voted down 3-2 with Dan and Jim voting in favor, and both made statements in defense of community policing. Beach decided that it was more important to prioritize cameras and placing of cameras around somewhere in the community, and we're going to talk about that in a minute as to if we have a role. They did get authorized a $25,000 lease for cameras that will be visible and tied into the Lee County Sheriff's Command Center out there. So they'll have visibility to the cameras, access to the cameras, but to my knowledge, they're not monitoring those proactively. The vice mayor's argument was always, look, if we need additional resources, the county should put them up here, and they should just pay for it. We shouldn't be doing that. And that was consistent with Mayor Murphy's, who made the statement from the dais here that let's do it. We'll pay for two if they pay for two. And then he never heard back from the sheriff, because they never reached out to the sheriff except to say on here that pay for two, we'll take two. And so that's why the vote went 3-2 as I watched that meeting. So with that, and again, I made out a list, and we'll go through it in a minute, but we should look at, we talked a great deal about what community policing would mean to the community, how it would work, how they would interact, and I think we should look at, going forward, how do we find other ways to find that same benefit to the community without direct contract with community policing resources from the county, if in fact they're needed. Next up on the list.
Wait, I have a question. Yep. Are we gonna have some comment about that? Because I do have a bunch to say, and I could kick myself. I couldn't get here for that meeting, because I do want to discuss this.
Which topic?
Community policing and what happened with the town council.
Okay,
Whenever you tell me I can say it, I will.
Oh, go ahead now.
Okay, I'm really frustrated that we took the time to speak to each one of the police officers. I met with them for 2 hours of my time. I know everybody else did, so we took time there. We took our time to develop a survey because they asked us to take a survey. The town took time. The information director, she spent hours. You spent hours. Everybody put all this work into it. The town response came back that they are in favor of community policing. Warranted more discussion. I felt like, why are we even here? Why do you even ask our opinion when we voted 6-0 in favor of community policing? I felt it was poo-pooed. They didn't even take the time to meet with the police officers, reach out, find out what the issues were. I felt slighted. I felt it's a waste of my time to sit here. And I spent hours developing that survey. And regardless of what people thought about the survey, it still was time that they asked us to do. I don't know how to combat it. I know the budget was set. There was monies in the budget. I did listen to that part of it. I don't even know where to go from here. I was so frustrated about how we were so negated and thrown to the side that nobody listened, that it dumbfounded me. Here's my 2 cents.
I just want to jump in there. I 100% agree with Dawn. And I feel that all of us have put 100% of our time into this committee, and we get nothing out of it. It's like they don't listen to us. They don't even know, why are we not having a joint meeting with them to discuss that? Everybody spent hours trying to, research this stuff. And that goes to the next item on the agenda. I was supposed to research the crossing aids. I didn't do it. You know why I didn't do it? I will do it if it is still the consent of the committee. But why should I waste 2 hours of my time researching this stuff? And it's like they don't care if we do it or not.
I want to tag on.
I just feel that they don't. They're going to do whatever they want to do, whether we do this work or not.
And I want to tag on to that. You made the perfect example. Roxanne is a vice mayor is a proponent for the homeless in the church, which is fine. And she asked you to go to talk to them and go to a meeting. You did. You took the time. You actually went and did it. I felt like we ask these things and we get nothing back in return.
Dan?
I have all kinds of problems with this. I live in the Times Square, off the Times Square area, off Old San Carlos. I have 2 buildings there. After 10:30, 11 o'clock, there's homeless. They're everywhere, and they live in Lynn Hall Park. Don't tell me we have little bitty numbers. I get the fact that we have small numbers in comparison to the rest of the county. But that doesn't mean we still don't have a problem. I grew up on this island. We did not have this problem until probably the last 10, 12 years. Abundant problem is what I'm saying. I have nothing against the churches and what they do. These other islands do not have this problem because they have rules and regulations and code in place and understanding with their police forces that they're to be taken to get help, removed from the area, that sort of thing. What we do here, why is there a public safety advisory committee? I agree with Heidi, I agree with Dawn, in the fact that why do we spend all this time in making recommendations to the council and then the council just goes, It's a waste of time if they're not going to listen to what we say. It's unbelievable to me.
Okay, who's next, Jim?
Jim, your mic's off.
Let's do this.
Community policing is not just adding a couple of more deputies to patrol the streets. And I've heard that from a number of sources in town hall that, well, if we're going to get a couple more deputies, that the county should pay for that because we are obviously the most important part of the county in terms of recreation. And really, community policing is for the public, for the people that live here. This would have been, in my opinion, an investment in the owners of our business community and in the people that live here all the time, the residents. Sure, we do a lot of things here to attract tourists, and we do a lot of things here to make sure tourists are safe. And there would have been obviously some residual impact in that respect. But I viewed this as an opportunity to invest in the people. And how does that work? This would have been a resource that an owner, a person who owns a home on a street, lives here year round, could reach out to and say, I have a problem, I have a concern. Our neighborhood's got some concerns. We'd like to have someone come down and listen to our concerns. I can tell you right now, no one else is listening right now. No one's listening. If you have a community policing program, they'll come to your house. They'll come to your neighborhood meeting. They will listen. They will do whatever they can within the scope of their capacity to try and help you. That's what community policing is. And what does that give the guy that lives here? It gives them a feeling that they have a little control over their destiny. They have a little control over their neighborhood. They have a little control over their environment. I think that's important. It also helps them feel a little better about their community as a whole, because their community and their government cares about them to provide them this resource. I think this was a big opportunity missed by our council. I serve on the fire commission, and I get that elected bodies have to make tough choices. They have to make decisions that they don't please everyone. But I think in the long run, I think this was a missed opportunity. I don't think the opportunity is gone forever. I have a saying: if something is really important and good and it needs to happen, mental pressure relentlessly applied will get there. But it may not happen this budget season. But I think if we continue to look at the project, continue to work with Layla and others, we can make an impact as a body here to maybe make this happen for the community in the future. So my 2 cents, I'm exceedingly disappointed. I think it was a great missed opportunity, and I think we have to continue to work towards making it happen in the future.
Mike, you want to say something?
Couldn't possibly follow that up. I agree with all of you in your sense of frustration. It's maddening.
I agree. I've gotten calls of people that know that I'm on this committee, wanting to know why we didn't support it. So they don't recognize that we were fighting for it. We brought it to the committee to recommend it, you know what I mean? So that's a misinterpretation by other people outside of here. Not aware of what we're doing.
All right, so first off, kind of,
Heidi?
Can I jump in here?
sure, Heidi.
I agree with what Jim said 100%. I choose to wonder, did the 3 people who voted against the community policing actually sit down with officers and get an idea of exactly what community policing is? I feel that they didn't take the time to actually find out exactly what it was going to do for our community, and they just had it in their head that they didn't want it and feel we didn't need it. And that I feel, again, this is my opinion, that they didn't take the time to do their due diligence and do their research on it. And I feel our public safety committee did way more research and got way more in depth than they did to figure out if this is something our island needs or not.
Okay, so let me start with, I completely understand the frustration, but we also have to understand our role. Our role is to research and make recommendations, and then they take those recommendations, put them in a queue with all their other priorities, and they make a decision based on information that we may or may not have. So I'll give them that. That is our role, and it's a frustrating role. So I serve on a couple committees, and I've been frustrated more than once on a couple committees, and you saw Borcap's frustration. So I do believe there's a disconnect between the committees and the council at times in communications. And I left through this. I gave this a great deal of thought after watching that meeting, actually watching a number of meetings. I was not surprised at the vote. Matter of fact, I was confident this thing was going to go down because I've been watching the council for the summer. And it was clear the direction it was going to go. As people said, they made up their minds. And that's their right. That's why they got elected and we didn't. I didn't run, they got elected. I don't necessarily think it was a complete waste of time. It was a frustration, but we did get a message out to the community. As Mike said, people are calling him saying, what happened to this? This was a good idea. So I think the community is more aware now than they were before of the fact that it exists. When I listen to the mayor in particular say, I don't know what community policing is, I don't understand these programs. I was mad at myself because I stood up there and told them what it was. I read it so that that's why I type it up, get it circulated to everybody for comments, and then read it so I know I didn't just go off on a tangent. And in there, it was very specific exactly how it would work. I can't tell you how many people called me after that meeting and said, I'll play poker with you anytime, because at the end of that section on community policing, the look on your face when no one had any questions is like, what the hell's going on? Why isn't anybody asking anything? And I was stunned. This was the #1 topic, and not a single question was asked about how community policing works. And next meeting, it was, I don't know what's going on. Well, you had the opportunity. And so I was frustrated with myself. I was annoyed. And I'm going to give you some recommendations how we change this going forward. Someone actually did recommend that they disband the public safety committee. They said, why do you keep these people around? Why put them through it? You're not listening to them anyways. I think that'd be a big mistake, because Dan Allers, who called me last night. He couldn't make it because of a conflict this morning. But Dan has stated publicly at the meeting, and then he was on Beach Talk Radio and stated it again. He is not giving up on that. Number one issue for him this year will be public safety, and he is going to go full tilt for it in any way he can. So there is an ally there. I think Jim was a strong ally as well. Jim was very frustrated. I would have liked to heard his full dissertation on policing and what he thought about it, but at the same time, I didn't want to spend another hour watching this show on the YouTube. So I do understand the frustration. It's shared equally by not just this committee, but a number of committees. And we will get to this in a little while, so I'm going to ask you to bear with me. I left on each of your spots a list of topics. And what I'm going to be asking when we get to this, because I want to finish the regular agenda, is that I want to go through and prioritize those that we think we still want to work on and those that we think we don't. And then I was going to recommend that the new chair go to the committee, but now I've been told that public safety has to report at the first meeting in October, so we need to do this today. And I will go here, and what I'm going to do is stand up there and read a topic, and I'm going to say, I want an answer. Is this a priority or not? I want a yes or no. Either, and if you don't tell me today, then you will give direction through Dan that this is or is not a priority to work on. If they feel it's not a priority, we drop it. If it's a priority, they've told us to work on it. Therefore, their responsibility to accept the information that we give them. Not accept it to act in what we tell them to do, but to listen to what we have. So it's having them identify priorities. I can tell you for 3 years now, I've been going to that council, reading what we're working on, reviewing what we're working on, and it's a passive just, okay, you finished yet so we can move to the next topic. And so I think it's time we just say, you tell us point blank, is it a priority or is it not a priority? And if it is, we'll work on it. If it's not, we don't need to spend our time on it. But we'll get to that in a little bit. Any more before we move to, we already talked about Sanibel Crossing aids. That has not been acted on yet, and that's on our list to discuss going forward. The next up, budget item update. Code Blue, did they put money in the budget for the Code Blue emergency communications?
For the Code Blue polls, there wasn't any money on the add-on list, so no.
So there is no money for this, so it's going to stay on our list as to whether they're going to do it. We know that they did provide $2,500 for Myers Beach bells and lights. So on the list, you will see setting up a bike rodeo safety day sometime in the future with the sheriff and that. So give some thought as to if anybody wants to kind of run that exercise.
Sorry, John, how much do they allocate for that?
$2,500. Well, they actually gave enough to buy quite a few sets there, which is a good change. With that, though, Randy, did we hear back? I know that we asked the town attorney for a ruling or an opinion on can we require the rental companies do two things. One, audible devices, and the second was lights. Their answers to Tom when we first looked into this 3 years ago now was that we don't rent bikes. We tell people not to ride their bikes after sunset or before sunrise. And so the question that we wanted an answer from the town attorney was, is there anything legally we can do to force them to put lights on them? And since audible devices are required 24 hours a day, and most of them still do not have those, is there anything in statute or in ordinance that we can go out and have someone fine them, or what the penalties are for not doing that? The answer that we got was, yes, it's required to have lights between, sundown and sunup. We knew that. We've known that. We want to know, is there anything that we can do to enforce that, lights, audible devices, and then what is the penalty if they're not doing that, and who is, in fact, can enforce that penalty? Make sense?
Yeah. So I reached out to John, and he has yet to follow up on that. But from what I gather, maybe he would like a little more direction from us, whether that's an ordinance that we want or some type of legal structure outside of that.
I'll be glad to talk to him, but I'll try and You tell me what I'm not making clear here. There is a law on the books, as we understand it, that all bikes must have audible devices 24 hours a day. What's the statute? What's the penalty for not doing that? And who enforces that penalty? And is the council willing to instruct whoever enforces it to enforce it? The second question is, since the law states, I understand the law, we want to confirm this, that you need them from lights on a bike between sundown and sunup. Resorts and rental companies do not have that because they're under the policy. What they told us is that we instruct the people that rent it not to ride their bikes between sundown and sunup. Is there anything we can do in creating an ordinance? Or is there a statute on the books that can be used to get them to, in fact, put lights on those bikes that they know full well renters are using between sundown and sunup? If that's not clear enough, I'll be glad to talk to them.
Follow up with them.
All right. Sidewalk markings, did they get funding in there to put sidewalk markings for?
I don't have an answer for that, but I know that we're in the initial phase of contacting Lee County officials. I know that in the past we've discussed bike markings, but not sidewalk markings.
These are the sidewalk markings for bike and pedestrian, you know, okay. All right, so.
You're saying bike is in the same category?
Two different categories, but in the past we've had a conversation about bike markings, sidewalk markings with them. We're in initial discussions with them about that.
Yeah, there really are two. One is the bike lanes on Estero, which months ago the town council said they wanted to do, and we're still waiting for the county, for their conversations with the county to close as to whether they're willing to sign an interlocal and who's willing to pay for it. And the second one was an interlocal for the markings on the sidewalk in the blended areas up north of Red Coconut.
And I know that we tried to get a Lee County official to come, but in such short notice, they, I think, a different date, potentially. So I'll update you guys on whether or not the next meeting they can attend.
Yeah, 'cause there's a good example. There's nothing more we can do on either one of those. We've made our recommendations, and it sits with the council and town staff to actually act on them or not act on them. But if, and this goes to prioritizing the list, if they don't want to act on it, then tell us fine, and we take it off our agenda. If they want to do it, then do it. All right, parking application. You got any updates on that?
The main vendor that I was speaking with kind of opted out. They said that their infrastructure wasn't up to par to what we wanted. I also reached out to Clearwater because they have a new parking application that I think includes both public and private parking. Pretty much I've been playing phone tag with the director for parking over there for almost a month now, so I'll reach out to them again. But as of now, there isn't any new updates on that. I know that when council directs that, whether or not they want to proceed with the parking application, the parking department would be in charge of that.
Okay, so at the council meeting, the budget hearings, council member Veach had asked for and was approved a raise in parking fees from $3 to $5 an hour. Did state in there that that money could be used to provide or build a parking application for the town. Councilmember Adderholt has spoken to me anyways, about looking at creative ways to deal with traffic. And one of those areas he looked at is the topic we've talked about in this group several times over the last few years, and that is the flow of traffic by providing an online application where people would know where to park instead of stopping every 6 feet, would put on the brakes and say, oh, no parking here, and then move on. So in theory, there is money in the budget to do this. I don't know that I necessarily agree with Councilmember Veach saying that this will be relatively inexpensive to do. I got a hunch this is going to be a monster to do. This is, I developed systems for over 50 years, massive scale systems, and this is not a small published system like that. I don't remember the woman's name who built that nice application of what's going on in Fort Myers Beach. It's basically a published application where you can look up and these are events, or this is here. It's a great application. I wish they would have put it out there. This is much more complex, because of, you have to have presence of who's in the meters, who's not in the meters, the ability to pay, the ability to distribute that payment back to the town and to the private vendors. It's very complex. So the question that will be taken to the council is, what role do you want us to play? Do you want us to research, and as a group, really look into developing the requirements for a parking application for the town? And if you do, the result would be the specs for an RFP that would go out for bid, and they would install this in a very professional manner. Or is this something that the council would prefer the town staff to do? And as Randy said, turn it over to the parking group, and we're out of it. And that's okay too. We just need to know what our role is. But I think if we're in it, my personal preference is, if we're in it to write the requirements, to develop an RFP, and then to review the RFP to make sure it meets the full needs for public safety and traffic movement, not just review some vendors that come in here and say whether they meet the needs or not. I think we need to develop this as the full specs for this RFP. Anybody else got thoughts on that?
Are we even qualified to do that, John? You know, a citizen committee is a citizen committee, and you can do some research, but, you know, you basically have the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker, and we don't know anything about traffic. We're not traffic engineers. That's why you have a professional town staff, in my opinion. And we could contract with a traffic engineering firm to maybe help us. I don't think we could develop it. Maybe some people have the talent to do that. I certainly wouldn't.
Not to develop it, to come up with the business requirements. So as citizens and, right, using traffic experts and that as part of our research, to come up and say that as citizens, we know this much about the island. We've interviewed traffic experts, and we've come up with, these are the requirements that would be necessary in a system in order to resolve traffic flow, protect the citizens, to collect and maximize revenues, to benefit the businesses, et cetera, et cetera.
So you're talking about defining the structure of what we think the application should cover, as opposed to how the application works.
Yeah, we wouldn't develop it. This would be a third party, we're gonna contract for, whatever. This is citizens getting together and meeting with traffic experts, meeting with the businesses, meeting with engineers, whoever it is, to come up with here's the requirements for an RFP. And that's really just the business requirements that need to be, the outcomes that we want to see from an application that's put in place. Not to design the application.
Okay.
Okay. Give that some thought, because we're not going to solve that today, but give it some thought as to what role we want in that. My concern is that we had the street lighting as a good example. We've had, 3 consultants now, Tom, that we've gone through on this thing since we started this. And I asked Tom, because, you know, we were the two that were, when they reconstructed the committee, been sitting through these things. And the results have been horrendous. I don't know who watched that street lighting report to council last week. If you went to our meeting, the joint meeting, you saw the same thing, the exact same thing repeated with virtually no change whatsoever. And I'm just wondering if, you know, us augmenting the town staff might be of some benefit on a parking application. Public comment, nobody in the public here. So member items will go around, and then I'll end up by going through this list here. So member items, Jim, you got anything?
I don't have anything else, John.
Mike? Zan? On? Heidi?
I just want to say that I commend Dan and Jim for giving us credit for all our hard work that we've done on the community policing or anything else that we've done. Thank them for recognizing that we do put our time and effort into it, and that they recognize that we do.
Right. Tom, you got any member comments?
Nothing additional other than my shared frustration with all of you. It's just very, very, very disheartening.
Yeah, you know, the frustration part, as I said, I watched that. Unfortunately, I wasn't surprised. I don't think anybody who really been watching from this committee was surprised that it went the way it did on most of the things we bring up. I've been frustrated, and you know, talked to Chelsea about it quite a bit, where we bring things up and they just literally, and whoever is chair next will see this, they just nod, thank you, and then they go on their merry way without any feedback. The communication between the committees and the council is in dire need of improvement. And the direction we get, or lack of direction, the lack of follow-up is amazing. And because of that, and it kind of a segue into what I was thinking about, you know, after those meetings and looking at going forward, I tried to come up with a list, and I if how complete it was, and I passed it out to you this morning. What I'd like to do is go through this list and get the consensus of this committee first. Do you want us to even look at this? Do you feel it's something that should stay on public safety's agenda or not? And then with this list, those that we agree that we still think that we should be involved in, we'll take to the council, read off a summary of what that topic is, and then ask them point blank, is this a priority for you or is it not? Then based on that answer, create the agenda for the next year. As I said, I had hoped to have some time to have the group go through this, meet on it next month, because next month is the reorganization meeting, and you will elect a new chair next October, and that new chair should be the one that kind of defines, you know, how they want the committee to work and how they want to interact. So first off, think about if you want to be chair, or you want to be vice chair, get your names to Randy so that you can be nominated. I know it's awkward when someone just throws out a name and everybody else can say, well, I'm not going to throw another name on top of that. So if you want to be chair or vice chair, get your name to Randy, and then next meeting, at the October meeting, they'll be able to nominate that individual when the nominations open up. So let's go through the list. Sidewalks on Crescent, and this was actually the first thing, Tom might recall, this is actually the first thing that we took on. We found the funding, we advocated for it, and because we had funding, the council was all for it. It got approved. I think it got through before they realized the Public Safety Committee had even convened. So the sidewalks are going in. What's the projected end date for those?
I know that we started this project, so I would say maybe this quarter. That's just without any issues happening.
By the end of the fiscal year calendar?
Yes, yep, I believe so. I'll follow
Refresh
up
my
with Chelsea.
memory on that project, John.
So what happened here was you recall, there's no sidewalk on Crescent until you get halfway down. Second, third, and fifth have partial sidewalks or no sidewalks. So the committee at that time had a heavy representation from the downtown area. And they came in, and that was one of the number one complaints. It was very, very dangerous walking down Crescent. Anybody who's ever tried to go from Matanzas after they've listened to some music for a while and walk those streets, no, it's not the safest thing to do. But we, as a committee, found the money inside the budget to pay for it. We advocated for it, and Chelsea put together a design with the engineers, and we were able to get approval. This was 3 years ago, and that's how long it takes to get something from concept to construction to completion.
Side of Crescent is the sidewalk on the...
Both. There was none. It's going on both. Although the Crescent will have sidewalk on both sides.
The Margaritaville project impact.
Go down there, you can see it. They're tearing it up right now.
Right.
Like,
So this is, the town putting in the sidewalk, Margaritaville is not contributing to the...
like under the bridge, as you're going under the bridge to Matanzas toward, down there, there's nothing. Or, and then on, before you even get to where Margaritaville would be.
That whole street is a mess.
And that's,
I guess I was hoping, as Margaritaville went in there, I would get cleaned up into a safe place to walk and converse.
prior to Margaritaville is when we had proposed this and the sidewalks. The vendor that contributed to this was Matanzas. Their CPD, when they were looking to expand Matanzas, actually had that they would contribute to the sidewalk. And they have. They've been working with Doug, and so that's all been factored in. So hopefully by the end of the year, you'll be able to walk down Crescent on a safe sidewalk with lighting and be able to go down and enjoy the bay.
Wow.
That was just kind of an update, but it took 3 years to get there, and that's just the timing of.
Just to clarify, the sidewalks are expected to be done by the second quarter of next year, so April, May-ish.
Chelsea's listening.
Yes, she's listening.
Thank you, Chelsea.
All right, crosswalks, next topic on the list, and there's a number of things under crosswalks. First, expanding the number of crosswalks. Heidi has a master list of where the committee at the time, when we were first asked to look into this, where crosswalks should go up and down the island, where additional crosswalks should be placed. We came up with criteria as to how we decided where those crosswalks should be. And the criteria, I don't remember all of it, but I'm sure Heidi has that, was basically if there's a retail establishment where someone would cross the street, say a 7-Eleven down by Junkanoo, for example, you know people are going to be crossing the street to get to a retail establishment. Or if there was a large development like Bay Beach down there, where people would be coming out of a large development, side street area, and based on that, you'd want to have a crosswalk for them to safely get across. That was the type of criteria we used to identify a number of additional crosswalks. It was put on hold because they were completing the road construction. And we said we'd revisit it after that. The issue with this is going to be, in order to put in additional crosswalks, they have to tear up their current curbs, sidewalks, make modifications on both sides of the road, because they have to put in the ramps for the handicap, and so there's a great deal of work to do in that. But there were a number of additional crosswalks that were recommended. As you go south on the island, I don't need to tell anybody, crosswalks become pretty sparse. And until they resolve the lighting issue, it's not only sparse, it's dark. And so the question is, does this group feel that we should leave that on our agenda to resurrect, and the survey, by the way, also talked about additional crosswalks. Is this a topic we think we should be taking and asking the council to continue to pursue? Just trying to, general thoughts, comments?
I think we should.
Agree.
Yeah,
Yes.
Enough.
high priority.
I agree.
And you still have all that mapping at home, right, Heidi?
Yes, I do.
All right, the next thing on crosswalks is the lighting design at the crosswalks themselves. The issue on this is coordination with the streetlight design. This may never happen, but the idea was the county has agreed to pay for lighting at crosswalks, existing crosswalks. At the time, which is probably about 1.5 to 2 years ago now, Rob came in and we discussed what it would look like. And at that time, the concept was there would be overhanging lights that shone down directly on the crosswalk, basically from each side. So when you walked across, you would have a spotlight shining down on the individuals in there and be able to see them as they were standing waiting to cross. County is still, I understand, still willing to pay for that, still willing to do the design, and they are waiting on the streetlight design. And the reason they're waiting on the streetlight design is the eye confusion and the blindness. If there's too many lights, or if the lights are in conflict, then they're doing no good. So my personal belief on this one is this definitely has to stay on there. It's an absolute requirement for the town, and the county's already agreed to do that. So any objections to leaving it on?
Absolutely not.
The next up on crosswalks was the warning devices, the RRFB.
RRFBs, right?
Which
Rapid rectangular flashing beacon.
Things that you see that flash when someone crosses. We were looking at where they go. Should they be increased? There's only a few on the island. The discussion really came down, and again, this kind of got aside because of the road construction, the county wanting to complete that before they looked at additional changes. We had gone through, and again, and Heidi may even have this, we had looked at where these RFBs should be, where there's high traffic. You know, you look at Red Coconut, there's one there, for example. There should be one at Bay Beach. There should be one down by Leno, et cetera, so that there is that visibility. The county's concern and is that you will get eye fatigue if there's too many of this. That's their concern. We can discuss that with them. What they did at the time is they talked about sign fatigue, and they showed us years ago the number of signs that were on the island. I remember that, but they brought in pictures. There were so many signs, you couldn't possibly read all the signs if you stood there for 20 minutes and tried to figure out what all the directional signs were. So they were saying that kind of fatigue would also occur if you put too many RFBs, and the cost of the RFBs were substantial. They are not cheap to put in. So we did have, from the survey, a number of people asking for improved warnings at the crosswalks. I think this is a legitimate concern, that the RFBs or some kind of warning device to identify these sidewalk or crosswalks is important. Other people's thoughts. Should it stay or should it be deferred?
Well, I think they're critically important. As we've seen, FDOT is very, very adamant about eye fatigue.
They need to be.
You know, and they're only 25,000 a pop. That, I know 25,000 here, 25,000 there, you're talking serious money. But I keep beating this drum. Linnell is incredibly dangerous. It's probably the most dangerous intersection on the island. It's horrible. It's really got to be done.
So there's
Sterling's
two
not
that
good.
need RFBs. All right, it's on.
Leave it on.
Crosswalk markings, this one I think we need to leave on here. This is, we've talked about this. I thought we had some agreement and that they were willing to repaint these. And the question of the interlocal and budget, there was no funding in there for this, crosswalk markings, but it's one that again, I don't remember the meeting, it was agreed to, and I'm not sure if it was agreed so definitively that no one would argue, but crosswalk markings is one we've already agreed needs to change. The survey was clear that they wanted improved crosswalk markings, and so if there's no objection, I'd like to leave this one on as well. FDOT, foot of the bridge design. Two issues here. The one is the number of sidewalks. I don't know how many more times we can go to the council and explain to them about putting barriers out there and using barriers to direct the pedestrians. We've offered to meet with individual council members multiple times to explain this so that they had it clear. When FDOT came the other day, there was some interaction about the sidewalks, but there was no answer from FDOT other than, we're going to have a public hearing and you can come. Well, I don't know about anybody else. My feeling is if a bunch of individuals go out, and I remember this from the design years ago when they first brought a redesign here, we went and talked to, and I know Kath and I went up and met with the engineers, and we made recommendations, and they said, well, that's nice, but, you know, really, what's the town want to do? So we can all go and to express that, but the town is the partner. And individuals in the community can voice an opinion, but it's the town, like the county, that they're looking for as partnerships. And so this one's my own personal one. I'm talk about frustration. I don't know how much more I can talk to them about these crosswalks and trying to get rid of them and all the rationale we had. But if the committee feels this important, I will have at it again, and then the next chair can have at it as well. So thoughts?
I got the impression that the counselors got our message on this. This was one of the few things where I thought, wow, they heard us. Because it came up, if it came up once, it came up 5 times. That's a lot of crosswalks at the base of the bridge, and I think we're trying to reduce the number of crosswalks at the base of the bridge. It's FDOT people that have sort of made up their mind and laid out a plan. It was really the first time I understood and appreciated that there's going to be a traffic signal there at the base of the bridge. They're going to control crosswalk signals. And their theory is no one will get in the street until the little light turns green and it says walk. And then people will walk across these crosswalks so that there'll be that there'll be a light on the other side of the bridge, and they'll be coordinated. So when traffic is flowing, traffic is flowing. There are no pedestrians in the street. When the lights turn red, pedestrians can cross during that time period, and both lights will turn red. So there'll be some stoppage on the bridge when those lights turn. Now that's what I kind of picked up from what I saw in that presentation. I was pleasantly surprised to see that they were going to try to control the traffic flow on these crosswalks with a traffic signal and with walk devices. They brought up pedestrians wandering in the street, and I think there was a lot of discussion about putting unfriendly foliage in the median, or even a railing that could in the median that would prevent crossover people. All in all, I think this is one of the few areas where I think our message has really resonated with council. I think they're going to try to do something with it. There's a lot of discussion also about the barrier at the end there, and that barrier is coming down so they can have an extra sidewalk. I think if any sidewalk, if we were going to, looking at that project, I said this one sidewalk should go. Let them walk another 10 feet to go to the crosswalk at 5th. This mid crosswalk out of here, that'll allow us to leave the barrier up so when someone comes flying down there at 2 o'clock in the morning, they don't end up in that business. So I would definitely want to leave it on there so we can maybe continue to try to have some influence, at least if nothing else, on that one area.
Other comments, thoughts?
I do agree with you. I think they do agree with us, so I don't know if we put it as like a top priority, but one that we just, if it comes up for debate, we all know where we stand and we push for it. I actually don't think there should be crosswalks across the middle. I mean, we about hit somebody the other day. You don't see them as you're coming down that bridge because you're not watching down here. You're watching the water. You're watching everything else. And I just think it's a total hazard. I think the council sees that as well. They're coming over the bridge as well. I don't know if I know you said about priorities. Maybe this is a sub-priority that we just keep our pulse on it. I know you said you're frustrated with it, and I'm sure the next person will be frustrated with it as well. But I do agree we need to make sure that we have a voice on it, because it is safety.
Others? Any other comments?
I agree with Dawn. I think
Here's my issue. Yes, I do think they know that crosswalks are a problem, but I have not heard a town official position on exactly what they want. They say, we don't like it. Have you thought about it? And the engineers go, yeah, sure, but we discounted it. I personally would like them to come up with a position that says this is what we want, do not want, or want. An official position, not community input in general at a review meeting. I also think, and building on a couple of things that you both have said, is that I see no reason to walk down there. They're creating walkways to nowhere. There used to be Ocean Jewel and retail establishments in the area. There isn't anymore. So why are we encouraging people to walk in spaces that have no business reason for being there? They could easily cut the traffic off at Crescent, foot traffic, send them across Crescent, push them through Times Square. We're investing millions of dollars to improve an area, help develop those businesses, move people through Times Square and down to Old San Carlos, use traffic patterns, foot patterns, to facilitate the businesses and to assist the businesses in the community. Take advantage of the millions we're putting into this beautiful new Times Square. I believe it's supposed to be beautiful. At the same time, we have for a long time now, and I know this is something that I've heard from council members over the years, get tourist development, make that that is a beach access, Times Square, and they always debate that. Well, if we drive all our traffic, foot traffic through there, it strengthens the argument for tourist development money. So I think, personally, what I'd like to do is, yeah, I agree we keep it on, but I'd like to go to the council and say, we'd like you, and we'll write it if you'd like the assistance, to develop an official position on what you think about the sidewalks and why, how you think they could be minimized and why we think they could be minimized.
I love that idea. And my question is this: why can't we come up with and I hate to say another meeting, but why can't we have something with the town council and with the powers that be at the town to say, these are the kind of things that we believe in, like you just said, we need to know what your position is on this. And we know where you stand and we move on. And we start communicating a little better between everybody so that we can understand where they sit, so we're not beating our heads. And it becomes more of a team working atmosphere where everybody says, you know what, we can do this. Some of the town people might have, some different ideas or things that they're working on that are some ideas that we haven't even thought about. I see that there's just 3 different players here sometimes, and everybody's saying their own thing or doing their own thing. It'd be nice if we could round everybody up together and say, all right, how do we really see this? Because FDOT is us battling the big guy, and let's get everybody together so that we all say, you know what, this is what we're doing. And that would then resonate with some of the bike lanes and things like that.
I'm going to revisit that at the end of the list.
Jump
Oh,
ahead.
no, your point's absolutely valid. All right, so FDOT stays on. Street lighting. I don't even know what to say on this one, to tell you the truth, so I'm open. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, on foot of the bridge. The other issue that came up, and I thought of Mike immediately when it did, when they showed the landscape rendering there with trees and bushes and barrier bushes, and it did not get raised. This is something Mike's brought up a number of times, is that if you open that area up and it's green space in there, we've all seen, well, not just little kids, but older kids that stumble through there as well, that people are not going to be looking in those bushes for little kids that decide they're running and playing and dart out. The one thing I think that we need to make and reemphasize now that they've shown a landscape rendering is that whatever landscape they put in there cannot in any way block visibility of children and people going through there. So the design outside had trees and everything else in it, and you know full well, kids going to be behind the trees playing hide and seek, and next thing you know, they're going to run out in that street. They're not going to pay any attention whether light is red or green or not, and some child's going to get hit. So when we talk about this, landscape is a key that Mike's raised, and rightfully so, for a number of meetings now. Anything to add to that, Mike?
No, but I've seen parents, we've all seen them, they got kids with them. All of a sudden, the kid just darts right out across the street. So parenting is tough.
Well, I'll just tell an anecdote. When they did the Old San Carlos, and they were talking about the light there, we met with the engineer, and they actually documented to get across that before the light was going in, that they said, we have documented where parents will push the baby carriage into the road to get the cars to stop so they could cross. So talk about parenting. Oh, all right, so street lighting. I'm open for any thoughts on this one as well. We've made our recommendations. They have our recommendations. And
Got a question about street lighting. Maybe Mike can. The big debate here is amber versus white. This is the tell-all debate. So what would it take, Mike, to change bulbs out twice a year? Literally to contract with FPL, set aside a week. They would come down and swap the bulbs.
Some lights will take multiple bulbs.
I know they've been talking about the dual bulb and all of that, and there's a lot of issues with that.
The best thing we can do is go with the amber lighting. Fixes everybody's problem.
Well, there's 2 levels of amber, and there's also all kinds of issues with amber, and they came up in those discussions. The low level of amber that I think Florida Wildlife Commission has approved would require 500 poles on Estero Boulevard in order to provide the adequate lighting for public safety. Which is insane. You could practically stand and touch them as you went down the street. It'd be like a
I've
picket
looked at the
fence.
poles down through there. We've got many poles that don't even light on them.
I mean, we have 130 now, I think they said, and I figured we'd need at least 150
130 that currently have lights on them.
currently have lights on. But there is a brighter amber that hasn't been approved by anybody yet that's under consideration that they're talking about, which obviously might provide more public safety lighting, as it were. And then I heard Dan putting forth a position which I don't know if that would please anybody, and that's to go with a white light but at a lower intensity.
The turtle people are not gonna go with a white light.
But you know what? Here's the deal. I don't think we can build a system in this town based on a constituency group that we commonly refer to as the turtle people. I think what we have to do is build a system that'll work with Florida Wildlife Commission and FDOT. I mean, these are the legal entities that we as a town have to answer to. I know we have to answer to constituents, but I don't think, if we had a constituency out there that wanted pink lights, are we gonna make pink lights because we got, a lot of people that want pink lights? I don't think that would be the direction that we would go. We would say what's legal, what's required.
I'll take that back. I didn't mean turtle.
I know, but I hear what you're saying.
I mean, turtle.
Turtle issue, the wildlife issue, the wildlife issue. It's a wildlife issue.
My other thing I wanted to add is after that hurricane and talked about all the power that was out, I thought about what are the odds if you don't have FPL behind you? That's a big ask if a catastrophe hits this island to have the town able to come in and be dealing with everything else as well as the lights, whereas now, you need to be working with your entity that is the most sound and that's going to be able to help them the fastest when you have a catastrophe.
So I get back to the same question.
Yeah.
If the white lights are safer for public safety, the amber lights are necessary during the turtle nesting season, what would it take to have a contract with FPL to come down and change out 200 light poles?
They would charge you, but I mean, Don's exactly right. I mean, these storms hit. I've been out there in that area, Louisiana, Texas, and so forth, working. Been to Beaumont, Texas. I've been everywhere out there. Charles, Anna.
Is it expensive to switch out the lights then? What,
They
twice a year?
fix them. I mean, as we're working, we're putting a light back up. The light works when we leave that spot.
So here's the bottom line in this, though, because we're certainly not going to solve what they do. We have made recommendations, and they've included inventory. They've included we want what's best for humans. We want uniformity, et cetera. Is there anything that you've heard since our meeting with them that would change our recommendations? If not, then what we'll do is just report to the council. We've made our recommendations. We have heard nothing that deters our recommendations or makes us change those. And I think we could debate this forever, and if Andy and Steve were here, we debate it for even longer. But right now, we've stated our positions. They read our positions. They didn't really include our positions, but they read them as part of their report. So with street lighting, that will be, look, we've given you our recommendations. They stand until there is a formal recommendation either by the council or by the town's lighting, and to which we can respond. Trolley safe haven shelters. First question is, will they pay? Are they going to fund the Code Blue? The second one there is, with these $25,000 worth of leased cameras, will they consider putting those in these shelters? Those that weren't familiar with the safe haven, it was in order to provide, and actually when you look at where the shelters were placed, it's about every mile you could get to a safe haven shelter for emergency health, emergency, or whether it's a safety issue, et cetera, shade. We originally asked for cameras and for the Code Blue. And unless there's somebody that's changed that, I'd like to go back in and still push for those two things. And then the additional is, are they willing to fund or work with the county to fund the additional? I think there's 9 more, I think, that we want to add, I think was the number. Chelsea has the list. So we'll leave it on there. Bike bells and lights, we talked about both earlier. One is we have to come up with a day working with the sheriff and the fire department to a bike rodeo safety day. So think about if anybody wants to chair that, coordinate that. And the legal question that Randy and I talked about a little earlier. That stays because we're actually working on that, and they approve funding for part of it. This bike restrictions in high-density pedestrian areas, Dawn brought this up one of her first meetings. As you get closer to Times Square, in Times Square, you're not supposed to ride a bike. Are there other areas, possibly Old San Carlos, and certainly as you get in front of Crescent Park in that area, do we want to ask the council if we should look into looking for other restricted riding areas in the downtown or blended sidewalks?
Have any now that are actually restricted?
Times Square.
Just Times Square.
Just Times Square. And Dawn, I'll let you talk because you brought this up at one of your very first meetings about extending that.
I thought it was just a little tight on bike riding all the way even to almost, pretty much Lonnie Kai. I mean, there's so much foot traffic, and I don't think there's room on the street. They have nothing for bikes.
There's no bike
There's
lane.
nothing there,
No.
so a little hectic.
You're recommending that we require people to get off their bike and
Either
push
get
it.
off their bike, or we create a new something, and I don't know where you'd even put it.
I agree with you.
Sidewalk markings, about earlier, it's funding in the interlocal. They've already agreed to it, so it's a question, are they going to follow through on it? Same with bike lane markings. Chelsea did mention this morning that they do now have funding to finish Northern Estero, so they will finish that with the bike lane markings, and it's still an outstanding question of, can they get an interlocal with the county? Who's going to pay for doing that painting on the rest of Estero? But council already agreed in principle that they want to do that, so I'll leave that on. Homeless community, as I said earlier, I met with the ministry, Beach Ministerial Association, I think it is. They were very much in favor of an open meeting. I've met with Captain Layler, who is very much in favor of it. The council, the mayor and Councilmember Adderholt were very much in favor of it when it was presented at that meeting. Now that the beach ministerial is in favor of it, I'm assuming that Vice Mayor may be more comfortable with it. And so think about how we want to organize that and who we'd want to invite, but I believe that stays on there because they did kind of instruct us to do that. Sanibel crossing aids, I'll raise that again. I know Heidi said that for various reasons she didn't look into that yet, and so I will see if they still want to do that or if that was just an off-the-cuff remark that was made during the meeting. But that was raised by the mayor, so I'll leave it on our list. The parking application has been raised now, and funding has been made available, so that would stay on our list. Neighborhood watch. There were a number of respondents to the survey that were interested in neighborhood watches. So the question would be to the council, would they like us to develop information with the sheriff, educational programs, and maybe getting some assistance from the sheriff or the outreach center to help communities make the service available on how to set up, come up with instructions how to set up neighborhood watch.
They do have that now. Lee County does have it, so it'd be more of a communication, getting it out to everybody and how to set it up.
County thing.
Yes, there's a woman who she'll come to your neighborhood. I apologize, I don't remember her name. And she explains everything, tells you how you get your signs, and talks about, tips and things.
All right, so
Good communication, we can work on that.
Dawn, if you could just give me a contact, not necessarily a name, but the group, And what I'll do is, at the meeting, when we go through the list, I'll just say that, you know, this came up in the survey, people want it, this is a service that's offered, we'd like to work with the PIO to inform the community on what to do with it, kind of the education thing that comes up next. Education in general, the question really here is there any particular topic they would like us to work with the PIO in developing education material on? The fire department, when we, way back when, I guess now, when we first started talking, I think it was Jim that brought up getting reports from the fire and the sheriff, monthly reports. I'd met with Assistant Chief Worth there and talked about the fire department, you know, where do they see the town and the fire department being able to work in coordination on some issues. And the one topic that came up that really stood out was short-term rental inspections, fire inspections. I think it's 3 or more units. They're mandatory. It's required by law that they get an inspection from the fire department. Under that, there is no requirement. So if you have a smaller facility that you're renting out, it's up to you to make sure that it's safe. But at the same time, the fire department has a number of instructional videos and programs available that allows, that will teach people how to do inspections and maybe even give them, force them to do an inspection and fill out some kind of form or something, or take an online test that they actually took a course in how to do a self-inspection. The idea that was raised with Scott at the time was using our short-term rental registration program and looking at the number of units that whoever that short-term rental person is, if it's under 2, either mandate or offer as optional direct access to the fire department's training programs, so that if I'm choosing to rent out a unit, rent out my house, that we could either make it mandatory, that I have to take some kind of training program from the fire department and validate that I took it so that I know that my property is safe for renters, or we make it optional, which may be the answer, but we link it to the registration program so that as they're registering, they're actually driven to this fire department site to get this necessary training. Now that they've increased it from $50 to $300, there's probably some money in there that would allow us to develop those programs. And so personally, I'd really like to see this go forward. I think it's a huge opportunity to improve the safety for renters on the island. And I think it was Bill brought up that we literally doubled the number of short-term rentals registrations over the last year. And I know just on our street, half the street is turned over. There's 40 houses on my street, and in the last 3 years, 3.5 years, half have turned over to new ownership, and most of those have become rentals. That was a fully residential thing when we moved there 12 years ago. There was very few rentals. So I think this is a big issue. I think this is a great opportunity to build a program that is necessary, and it should be relatively cheap to do because the programs already exist at the fire department. Right. So if everybody's okay with that, I'd like to leave that on there as a recommendation. And finally, is cameras. They said they allocated $25,000 to lease cameras to be placed strategically around I guess strategically around. They just said to lease cameras. They didn't really say where they're going, how they're going to be monitored, or any of that. I guess my thought was asking them if they want the Public Safety Committee involved at all in the placement, monitoring, use of, et cetera, the cameras, or if they've already got this taken care of. I'm just basically going to ask the question what they want us to do. We've done nothing with it in the past because prior councils had no desire to have cameras. This council does, so I'll ask if they want us to participate in any way, and if so, how. And that's my list. Anything I missed that comes off the top of your heads? If you think of something before the October meeting, I'll add it. So, next steps. As I said, my original thought was to go over the list, let the new chair come up with how they want to handle it, but I was advised today, Tuesday, I guess Monday, by Chelsea that the Public Safety Committee has to do an advisory report at the October meeting, the first meeting in October. So, building on, following up with what Dawn was saying there, here's my suggestion, and this is only a suggestion that let's figure it out, is that I take this list, a little definition into it, and I'll get that circulated, like we always do, to get your comments. Then I'll take the list and take it to council, and basically say, these are the topics that we have been working on. This is a summary of the topic. What we'd like you to do, council, is to take this list as the agenda for a joint meeting in October or the latest November with the committee. At that joint meeting, the committee would like you to go through each item, discuss each item, and prioritize each item, and give your feeling, council members, on what you'd like the council actions to take, the committee to take. And then from that would drive the agenda for the next year for the Public Safety Committee. That's the thought right now. Thoughts on that?
I like that. I'd like to add, being able to add some people from the town, maybe some people from the town who actually have some weight on some of this as well.
Town staff?
Town staff, yes. Such as education, might have some additional, things like that.
What about inviting one town council member meetings at a time?
Sure, follow, Mike.
Rotate them through?
That's what they have Dan for. Dan's our liaison.
Dan knows what we're doing, but other people on the council.
I know some of them actually watch the meetings because I get comments after a meeting where they'll write and they'll ask, not all of them, but some of them do. That's a topic we can bring up at the joint meeting as to how they would like to improve communications, because we have some reservations, as I do, as to doing these reports that we were giving every month to them and going and telling what we're going on and what we're doing. Apparently wasn't the most effective way to do that. So improving communications with individual members is a topic that should be part of that meeting. Other thoughts? If not, that's the plan. We'll write something up this week and get it for circulation, and that will be for the agenda, Randy. So Chelsea, that's what you and Chelsea will get, or the agenda for October 3rd or whatever. It's early in October, whenever this meeting is, I know that. That will be the objective of that, is to ask for a joint meeting to be held at their earliest convenience, which is either our regular meeting in October or a special meeting in early November. Heidi.
Heidi here. We used to have joint meetings with them like every couple months, and we haven't had them in a long time.
Okay. Final comments
I like Mike's idea.
about the rotating?
Yes.
To offer them the opportunity.
I do as well.
That, is it going to offend our liaison, our permanent liaison?
No, but he can still be here.
It would give all of them a chance to.
Exactly.
Actually, it may be something they want to do for all the committees.
Why aren't you staying on as our,
I've been doing this for over 3 years, and it's time for a change. I mean, I truly believe that there needs to be a changeover in leadership to get new ideas and new styles and that to do it. So that's why. I was really annoyed watching some of the decisions in the budget, and I'm not doing it out of frustration. I'm doing it out of, and I talked to Suzanne about this before, that I truly believe that no one should sit in a chairmanship or an appointed position as the chair for more than a couple of years. 3 is the max, and I've done more than 3 now. So I think it's time to find a change in style and a change in leadership. So that's why. It's not me making a statement about I'm fed up. This was planned well before any budget hearings.
I just say that you've done a brilliant job, and I appreciate all the work you put in, because I know how hard you've worked at this, and you've been a great chairman.
Thank you.
I agree.
Yeah, you've been brilliant. I can't have
I
to tell
agree
you.
also.
Well, I'm still not running again, so,
Damn.
you know.
Come on, John.
Thank you. No, this, you know, it's been an active group, and so I just, the part that's frustrating, and I hope the next chair, you know, has success with this, is improving follow-through from the town on the recommendations. We've come up with some really good recommendations as a group, and yeah, that's a great idea, let's do that. We've even gotten that, it's a great idea, let's do that at joint meetings where they've instructed, you know, to go forward, and 3 years later, it's still not done. And so that part is one I'd like to see improved, and I think some of the suggestions about getting more of them to see here and for us to be able to talk to directly, you know, one-on-one, group to one type thing, might be a way to do that. Hoping that by going and asking them to prioritize the list and actually physically sit there and say, yes, I want you to do it, that there's a more buy-in than when we come with recommendations. And so hopefully that's where we go. So if there's nothing else, think about who wants to be chair and vice chair. And vice chair can certainly stay on, even if she's frustrated. And get your names to Randy, and we'll meet again in October. But I'll get something out later this week as to the report that'll go to council in the first meeting in October.
Before we end, do we have any edits to the agenda for the community policing? Do we want to change that to community watch?
Where are you, Andy?
Public safety survey updates.
All right, I'm
I'm
still
sorry, what?
The agenda?
oh, looking
Under
at,
public safety survey updates B, do we want to update that to community watch since we talked about wanting to pursue?
oh, for the next agenda?
Yep.
Oh, we'll work on that after we meet with the council.
Okay, sounds good.
We'll do the, so for the next year, what happens is, about 2 weeks before the meeting, you come up with an agenda, send it to Randy. Randy and Chelsea look at it, they update with actions the town has taken, and then together we come up with a joint agenda and it gets sent out. So and this week, what I'll do is wait till after I get the actions from the committee or the council, and it will build that into the agenda. That'll be the agenda that we run for the October meeting.
And I do know that, Tom, your application hasn't been received by the clerk's department, so if you are still interested.
It has not been received, yeah. Yeah, I've done my time.
Okay. Let them know then.
Well, if you're not reapplying, thank you, Tom, because you have been a stalwart since this thing got reformed 3+ years ago. Matter of fact, we're the only two that managed to stick it out for the 3+ years and actually signed up for more than one go-around at this thing. But strong advocate since the beginning about the bike safety on the island. A lot of the stuff we talked about with the lanes and crosswalks and the RRFBs and all that. Tom's been the champion of that. For those that don't know, Tom actually traveled around and viewed other communities on how they did the parking lanes, or the bike lanes, and how they designed them to bring back ideas that have been brought into what you're seeing out there. And he took on the task of going out and meeting with all the rental companies and the bike rental companies when we first started talking about that ordinance. So he's the one who went out there and tried to say, no, you're in violation, and got to listen to them saying, no, you don't understand the law like we do. So thank you, Tom. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom.
All right, anything else?
When is the next meeting?
It will depend on, well, I think we need to put a date, but we put a tentative date, but it'll depend if we can get that joint meeting with them in October, if we can find time on the council's calendar. I'd like to use that to get into it. What is the third Tuesday of the month?
October 19th.
19? A motion to adjourn?
Moved.
We're out of here. Thank you. Andy here? The minutes. All right.